Sentiremo due brevi relazioni del collega il professor Fabio Toriello dell'Università di Sassari e sentirete di nuovo il professor Matteo Colleoni dell'Università Milano Bicocca. Io non ho altro da aggiungere, volevo solo far capire a voi che cosa stava succedendo e per il significato di questo inserimento significativo, a mio giudizio, a nostro giudizio, nel percorso della scuola estiva, di questo momento di riflessione condivisa con gli amici del progetto Cycle che coinvolge appunto questa specifica realtà locale. Do la parola a Sebastian Bonis e poi credo potrete autogestirvi. Fabio, guarda te, in autogestione. Prego.
Hello everyone, thank you for inviting us. My name is Sebastian Bonisch. I'm representing the Oralia Metropolitan Area, which is the lead partner of our joint project, which is called Cycle Walk. It's a project funded by the European Union through a financing instrument called Interreg Europe. They are supporting the cooperation in between different regions from all over Europe on specific topics. The topic which we focused about was cycling and walking, measures, policies in these two topics, and we tried to involve partners, regions from different parts of Europe. We try to be to cover as much as possible geographically different regions. I will not enter in too many details. The partnership is formed by the Oralia Metropolitan Areas from Romania. We have as partners the municipality of Olbia, the region of Sardinia, the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation. I don't know if you've heard about this sort of this type of association, which is basically at least two administrative units from two member states of the European Union. It's to come back, is the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation of Gorizia Nova Gorica, so from Italy and Slovenia. We have as partners the region of Burgenland from Austria, the company which is in charge of mobility in the city of Vilnius, Lithuania. Did I forget anyone? No, I don't think. And as advisory partner, the University of the Eurocycling Institute of the University of Amsterdam. I think what's important to be stressed out is that this is not it's a cooperation project, so it's not a research project. We were not our goal was not to go too deep into a research activity, but was more about sharing our experiences, sharing our knowledge on topics related to cycling and walking. And in all this process, the University of Amsterdam was the advisory, the leading, they were professionally leading our activities. The main instrument of the project was study visits, so we were going in each of the partner regions, and we were visiting, experiencing the existing policies, measures, and infrastructure related to cycling and walking in the partner regions. We started it in 2017, the beginning in January, and here we are, December 2019. So this is the last study visit of our within the project. Now we have to draw some conclusions to identify those good practices which were, in our opinion, the most useful, and those good practices which we can, to a certain extent, transpose in our own regions. This process of experimenting, transferring the good practices will be still part of the project. There will be a second phase of it for the next 2 years, so 2020 and 2021 will be about that. And hopefully we will be successful in that, and we'll manage to change into better the reality of cycling and walking in our regions. As far as I understood, this summer school is focusing on tourism. During our, just to relate it a bit to this event, we tried to analyze cycling and walking from many aspects. So both cycling as a mode of sustainable transportation in daily activities, but also cycling as an instrument or a mode of transportation for tourists. And for instance, this was a rather interesting part of the study visit we had here in Olbia, because Olbia is definitely a tourist attraction, a region, a city which attracts tourists. And it's interesting to experience the views, the ideas, the plans which are existing in place here from this perspective. And this transfer of good practices. We've been to Burgenland. Burgenland is having an extensive network of cycling routes which are dedicated to tourism. I would recommend everyone, in case you like cycling, to spend some time in the region. It's really a very supportive, and from this point of view, it's incredible the infrastructure they have there. I wouldn't, in case you have questions, I'm here, we are here. I don't know what's the dynamic of the event. If
You
what,
can go on.
yeah, okay. I would like to invite now George to make his presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Sebastian, and I'm very happy to be here today. So I'll try and speak slowly and make lots of gestures so you all understand. First of all, though, I want to point out that this right here, this is very cool. This drawing of the event. So I think we're very fortunate to have something like this happen, and I hope to see it on the internet somewhere. Right? Okay, so I thought today the topic is tourism, and you've touched on, based on what I've been told, some ideas based on how people travel and sustainability being themes. So on that theme, I thought it would be interesting to try a new type of presentation format, where instead of the person flying out here to do a presentation, we can try and do part of it by video. So here we go. Okay, so I am from the Urban Cycling Institute at the University of Amsterdam, along with my colleague Oliver here, and Meredith Glazer. We have a website, you can check out our full staff, and this is what we do. Right? So we try and take a multifaceted view on cycling, try and explain to people why cycling is so interesting. And how many people here have been to Amsterdam or the Netherlands? Anyone? Yeah, okay, great. A few from our tour group. See, they're very enthusiastic. So if you haven't been, it's a good place to check out. And it's especially a good place to look at urban mobility, right? And actually tourism, because we're just like you, struggling with growth and how to accommodate many, many tourists, and also some tourists who don't know how to ride a bike. So that creates some very interesting situations. We are academics, and we are in the business of trying to share our knowledge with you, and hence we were invited onto this cooperative project by Sebastian. Okay, so but first, I understand this is a sociology conference, so I'll try and make the link between sociology and cycling, right? And today we're going to try and focus on this paper. If you have a phone and you take a picture of this, you can go on the internet and find this paper, because right now, after this, I'll be showing a video where we discuss this paper. And I figured it might be a lot of fun. So just put this into Google, and you'll be able to pull it up. Okay? So this paper kind of explains how Dutch cycling is related to the history of the Dutch as a country, as a sociologically, the bicycle has been associated with different types of people, right? So what are some things that come to your mind when I talk about cycling? What are some images? You know, anyone? Some images that come to mind? What do you think? Ah, a bicycle.
Hello. Cycling is freedom.
Freedom. Okay, good. Freedom is one image. What type of people ride bikes? What are the, do you ride, why don't, how many people in this room ride bikes? Ride a bicycle? Okay. Now, I have more people from our project. The students, who rides a bicycle? Ah, professor rides a bicycle. Okay, great. What's the image? What's the image? Sorry, guys. What's the image of someone who rides a bicycle?
For me, it's the image of everyone, because in my town we are riding bicycle from young children till 90 years old people. So really, everyone can go by bike in the town, and this gives me a sort of feeling of easy going and freedom, of course, and yeah. Yes.
Okay, now I am sure there are those of you in this room who disagree with that. Does everyone in your city ride a bicycle? Can kids and old people and people from all ages ride a bicycle, or is that not possible? Italiano is okay. Anyone want to take a stab? All right. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, great. I understand the language thing. Okay, so I'm going to play this video, and I want you to pay attention to the background because we filmed this in Amsterdam, where many people ride a bicycle. Pay attention to the variety of people that ride bikes, and just think about how it compares to your home context. Okay, and you should look.
Welcome back. In last lesson, we learned about how the Dutch Prime Minister even goes to work on a bike. So this week we'll talk a bit more about the academic side, about how Dutch culture is conceptualized and how that relates to cycling. So this week's article.
Yeah, today we're going to read with you an article written by Kiselina Kuipers, and she actually wrote it as part of her inauguration as a professor. She's a professor in sociology at the University of Amsterdam, and as such, she uses the bicycle, also in the article, to explain sort of sociology 101. So how can you look at the development of culture in a society, and in this case especially in a country, from the lens of the bicycle. So the article is about a thing which is called the national habitus, which is a very thick concept from sociology. It's a concept developed by Pierre Bourdieu, and she uses it to explain why cycling became such a mainstream thing in the Netherlands, while just if you cross the border to either Germany or Belgium, it sort of falls apart. So she uses it to discuss how cycling is related, is shaped by the Dutch culture, and especially the culture of egalitarianism, where using conspicuous consumption works against you. So the Prime Minister uses the bicycle to show how normal he is, and that works in his favor. And she discusses that and shows also how it is, again, shaping culture. So the bicycle is shaped by culture, the culture of egalitarianism, but it also helps to keep this culture alive.
Now, there's some academics who argue that the idea of a national unit analysis isn't very useful.
Yeah.
But in our case, like I've ridden my bike across the border to Germany or Belgium, and you can see it right away.
Yeah, and there's also a discussion going on after this paper was published on how this nationality, this national habitus is breaking apart. And she also touches upon it already in the article, that maybe this idea of a national feeling of unity is being replaced through all kinds of pockets of maybe even global unity, where people in Amsterdam that bike are very similar to people in New York who bike, but are less similar to people in the Netherlands that ride a car. So there's already an ongoing discussion in this paper.
And could you comment a bit about this idea of different types of cyclists in the Netherlands, people who ride cargo bikes, for example.
Yeah.
People take children on their bikes. Like there's this differentiation happening. What's going on there?
Yeah, this differentiation is definitely happening. If you look around in a city like Amsterdam today, is that you see that the bicycle, which was this conspicuous non-consumption, you wanted to show that you were normal, so it was a black bike, an Oma bike, similar to all the others. And then the last 15 to 20 years, there have been some arguments saying that it became much more a symbol of distinction. So with your type of bicycle, a cargo bike or a rental bike or a very stylish bike, you would actually distinguish yourself as a specific subgroup. And these subgroups, they might relate more to subgroups elsewhere, again, than to different subgroups within the same city. So this might break down this logic of a national habitus. So there's still an ongoing discussion into which direction this will take in the future. So think only about what bike sharing will do to this.
So I guess it's time to get to it. And
let's go!
So that's your cue to do this reading, right? So if you haven't taken a picture already, take a picture and read further if you're very interested. Okay. So if you want the full more to learn about this, we're making an online course of which that's an excerpt, and we'll be releasing it early next year. There'll be more good stuff about cycling at the Urban Cycling Institute. So now I'd like to pivot a bit from sociology into design, which is my specialty, and I want to think with you about how to design the ideal cycle path, right? If you had all the resources, what would the ideal bicycle path be, right? And I think there's some places where they're making progress towards this, and once you're able to remove some political constraints, you're able to have more freedom in how you design these bike paths. We need to think about what a bicycle is and what do cyclists want. Right. So I went around to the Netherlands, Belgium, Copenhagen, a few cities in Germany, and also the Netherlands to interview some practitioners about what they think a bicycle highway could be, and we will go through some of the responses. This is one of the brochures from Germany, and I think this is very indicative of what a bicycle highway could be. This is applying some car-centered logic onto bicycle infrastructure. So right here you see very literally a bicycle on a highway, right? Is it autostrada? That's a highway? Yeah. So cicli autostrada. Is that right?
Ciclo autostrada.
That, right? So that's what my research is about, okay? So here is one way to approach the design. This is what I would call an engineering-centric approach. You're given blueprints, you are given measurements, 3 meters for one way, 4 meters for two-way, and essentially then you design around this parameter, and if you're able to meet those parameters, then it's connected to a funding mechanism, and the national government says, okay, you can go ahead and build this. But there's something's missing, right? So this is another way of how it got derived. This is, you're on the left, you have a human bicycle, again with measurements, 1 meter, 250 tall, and then you can see, using this, if you need to put 4 or 5 beside each other, then you make 1 times 5, 4 meters, 5 meters wide, right? This kind of logic. What I'm asking about is, okay, what about these other things that are more difficult to measure? Social aspects, it could be fun, it could be this idea of smells where you pass through some area of nature and you hear birds chirping. So what are the things that we can't really quantify, and how do we describe these aspects? So here on the right, how do we describe aspects of diversity, culture, and how do we incorporate that into design? And then how do we also use traffic logic, so things like speed, uniformity, safety, to create this idea of an ideal bike path. These 2 concepts I'm working on is borrowing the idea of psychology and human perception from human-centered design, and and also using a deeper analysis of going and asking, well, what do cyclists want? Okay, and I think that is the transition that we kind of have to make as we develop higher quality bicycle infrastructure. Here's some findings from our research. Bicycle highways, clearly in that name, it seems like it's a functional network. So it's primarily designed for people to get from A to B. But when I interviewed practitioners, they also said they would like to have this added value of a good experience. So one person said, I asked, what is the ideal cycling infrastructure? And he or she responded with, well, ride hands-free. So it's infrastructure that you can ride without having your hands on the handlebars. So this idea of freedom, this idea of carefree, is something that even practitioners are aware of, but it's difficult to put into practice. It seems that we need to take the need of users into account. So someone who is racing on their bike or on a mountain bike, as I see a lot here, is very different from someone who's just getting from the store or to work from home. Maybe you have kids, and that's also both a speed difference, but also a difference in how you want to use the infrastructure. And finally, bicycle highways are flexible, and it offers the opportunity to say, okay, so if you want to go through a city center, how do you transition between this nature landscape into something that goes through the downtown, through stores, through some places where the space is more constrained. So how do you make that transition, and how do you make it cohesive into one route? So rural, urban, rural, how do you cut through a city? And these are questions that force designers to come up with some creative solutions. And these are the questions I asked them to get their perspectives. And next, I just want you to think about whether these infrastructure appeal to what you think good cycling infrastructure is. Okay, so we'll go through some pictures. This is the Hoven Ring in Eindhoven, the Netherlands. I used to live there for 2 years. Right, so suspended exclusively for the bicycle. But do you think this will be pleasant? Do you think this is nice? City in Germany, bicycle highway, rural area. You see a separation between cyclists and pedestrians. Lots of room, somewhat in nature. Is this a good cycling experience? Here we have Copenhagen. This is also a bicycle highway, C99 is one of their first projects. And you can see this is just a bicycle path on the side of the road. So it's marked as a bicycle highway, and clearly this goes through area with cars along the street. So maybe not much physically to differentiate it, but it does have a route marking. So maybe it's cohesive as a part of the route. Here you have bicycle path combined with traffic. So even where they had lots of room in nature, they decided that the car volume was low enough to combine both bicycle traffic and car traffic. And then this is people tell me this is a bit of a disaster. So when they built this bicycle route, it was meant as a bicycle street, but they had this car parking going on. So there's a lot of in and out of cars, but it's meant as a bicycle route. Okay. So I wonder if you would be comfortable riding down that, even though it's designated as a bicycle highway. Here's some quotes, from practitioners who work on bicycle highways. Some of them clearly don't know what it is yet. Is it this language used to sell it politically? Is it just something that is used to get funding? And there are others who say, well, it has to look more than an ordinary bike path, something extraordinary, if you will. A super, something better than a bike path, something that you can clearly recognize at first glance. Here's a problem. What does high quality mean? Right? I gave you a very technical definition in the beginning about dimensions and 4 meters wide, maybe with trees, priority crossings. But is it okay to just have a quiet road? And can you make that as part of your bicycle, high quality bicycle infrastructure? Okay, and from London, the practitioner told me that the important thing is to not treat cyclists as an afterthought, so making cycling feel like it's a priority. Yeah, so it's more about the perception from the perspective of the cyclist that you're being treated as a legitimate user of the road, you know, and not just a bit of paint, not an afterthought. So, what's next in my research is we looked at the practitioners. What's next for me is to look at how users perceive this. So what I've done is I've mounted cameras to we called up 20 people, and we mounted cameras to their bikes, and I interviewed them going down 3 different routes. And we wanted to look at how we define aesthetics, so things like vegetation, noise, garbage, things that are perhaps difficult to measure, and try and do this measurement qualitatively, so through words, through interviews, and see what we get. Okay, so we picked routes A, B, C. People went from the city center here to their homes up north. And you can see they're all going from A to B in the same place. My question is, okay, if you take these different routes, which one do you prefer? Even though C is longer than B and B is longer than A, do you take the shortest route? So do you prefer a bit of nature at the cost of more distance or a longer commute? That's up and coming. And here's some interesting questions that we can ask from this. Is flexibility good in bicycle infrastructure design? How do we think about cycling experiences? And how do we consider cycling needs within the context of functional connections? Can functional connections be at the same time fun and pleasant? Or is there another way to think about this? And that is all from me. Thank you very much.
Prima di cominciare con l'inglese, proprio sentitemi 60 secondi in italiano, non solo per ringraziare Antonietta, Camillo e Sara dell'occasione che mi hanno dato di lavorare un po' con loro, ma anche perché mi avete dato una delle tante occasioni in questi 14 anni di bella convivenza culturale di ascoltarvi. Allora, qua viene da una parte il ringraziamento per aver ascoltato le cose interessanti di cui vi occupate e però poi anche l'imbarazzo che comincia da qui adesso e ve lo spiego. Anzi, vi confesso, faccio quasi outing, forse io avrei voluto fare sociologo. Ho mandato un'ora fa ai miei figli sul gruppo di WhatsApp una serie di messaggi scordinati in cui gli ho detto: ragazzi, voi non avete idea, sto capendo molte più cose della mia vita e quindi anche della vostra, di quello che mi sta succedendo, di quello che sta succedendo all'umanità. Allora il grande mi ha risposto: ma chi è che stai ascoltando? Sto ascoltando dei sociologi. E mi risponde: ma me lo dici adesso che mi sono appena iscritto a legge? Gli ho risposto: no, ma sei in tempo a cambiare. È intervenuto il piccolo e ha detto: io sono in tempo a fare direttamente la mossa giusta e non iscrivermi a legge. Quindi forse il mondo è salvo. Ci sarà
poco, fanno pochi picci.
Non volevo dirlo, ma c'era anche la mia ex moglie come partecipante al gruppo e che mi ha fatto un commento di questo ma è una questione di alimenti, ma non è di questo che vi volevo parlare. Invece ecco, le cose interessantissime di cui avete parlato voi sono però anche contemporaneamente frutto di imbarazzo, perché permettetemi anche di dire che è un pochino unfair che adesso, dopo le cose da stamattina oggi pomeriggio, temi, considerazioni, aperture di orizzonte sulla realtà, sul futuro, interessanti e appassionanti. Ecco, questo è il problema da genitore e anche da educatore. noi vorremmo dare passione, ma non possiamo imporre le passioni a chi ci ascolta, però senz'altro le cose di cui avete parlato voi infondono passione in chi adesso deve parlare il giurista, però, cioè questo è complicato perché di solito i ragazzi vengono a lezione sapendo che vengono a lezione, un po' come dire vado dal dentista, se vado dal dentista poi non mi posso lamentare del fatto che non è un'esperienza divertente, però cerco di mettercela tutta per non rendere too boring l'esperienza. Allora, shifting into English. Law exists to try to solve and overcome human, very material problems. Let me give you an example taken from what our colleague just told us a few minutes ago. Less than 1 month ago, in Milano, there was a guy, this person is traveling all throughout Europe with his bike, and he stopped almost in every country in Europe, and when he came down to Milano, in one night he had his bike stolen. Of course, I'm not talking bad of Milano. Milano is one of my, as a multi-localist, Milano is certainly one of my town, but this is what happened. So law has the specific role to try to take very human and bad problems, because we are not angels in paradise. Why is normally a law lesson little less interesting than a sociology lesson? Because the lawyer typically deals with very material problems with tools that look at the past. Cioè, il diritto guarda a quello che è andato storto nel passato. Law, rules, in order to be formulated, phrased, and conceived, need necessarily to look at the past experiences, so to what has gone wrong in the past. The best legislators in history are those who try to look ahead, but this is very rare. And I'm Italian. You know how many, and many of you are also Italians, you know how many governments we had in our history, and if we change too many governments, there's no consistency. The risk is that there's no consistency. The risk is that there's no linearity in a legislative, in a planning of law production. That's why, in addition, my speciality is what we call private law, civil law, not the civil law in the exception as opposed to common law, that is to say, English law and like, but civil law meaning the law that relates to the personal relationship between people, among people. This specific branch of law, fortunately in Europe, was settled. 1 century ago, let's be not so much precise, at the end of the 19th century and certainly up to the mid-20th century, those were times when kings, emperors, or parliaments tended to use very good experts. Not necessarily it's the same in the last decades. This is an introductory remark to let you know that when we come down to tourism, we have a big fragmentation. So, first question, do we have any law at all? Are there rules governing the phenomenon that we call tourism? And the answer is yes. Almost everywhere in the world there are pieces of legislation, but this is fragmented, This is not brought to any coherence, and it's kind of following fashions. Because a leading country commences to have its own legislation on tourism, the other countries tend to follow. Who may be considered a leading country in legislating on tourism? Ce lo immagineremo noi che la Cina è stato uno dei primi paesi a dotarsi di normativa sul turismo, il Vietnam a inizio anni 90. In other words, many national countries, many states have adopted, independently one from the other, its own legislation on tourism. However, there is no international coordination at all. This is a typical problem that we have whenever we tackle international phenomena per se. What is a possible common feature, un tratto che caratterizza un po' tutte le legislazioni nazionali sul turismo? Common feature. It seems that we all in the world are taking for granted one thing, that there is something that we call a subjective right to tourism. Questo è un punto interessante, cioè diamo tutti per scontato che c'è una cosa che si chiama diritto soggettivo al turismo. Non è una cosa, it's not something irrelevant, it's not, it is an undemonstrated assumption that subjective rights do exist. This is more a philosophical issue than a legal issue. What are rights? What a subjective right is. Anyway, it seems all the legislation from China to Vietnam to Montenegro to Italy to all the European countries have a bunch of samples of national legislation, but let's take the Chinese one. This law is made to protect the legitimate rights and interests of the tourists. There is no definition of the right is, and it seems we are taking this assumption as natural. The second remark, and this may be useful to also identify a second common feature in international legislation on tourism. The second assumption that we all take for granted is that, let me express it with the United Nations. This was cited this morning. The United Nations Special Agency for Tourism. It's called the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Sorry, UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organization. What do they say in their basic document? It's almost a legal document, not fully a legal document, because it's called Code of Ethics. Whenever you hear about ethics, morals, it means that it's not 100% law, but it will, probably. It's likely to become law. No? Quindi codice etico vuol dire che non è ancora un codice punto e basta. Se noi in italiano, whatever other language we use the word code alone means law. It's one of the most ancient forms that law may have. But if we add some other word like nice, beautiful, fantastic code of ethics, it means it's not so fantastic, good, and super strong. In fact, it is not law yet. No? International lawyers, cioè gli specialisti di diritto internazionale, lo chiamano soft law. No? When law is not ready, grew up at the stage of formal and final rule binding on someone, the language that normally is used in international law is soft Soft law means recommendations, code of ethics, best practices. So whenever you hear these formulas, it means it's not law yet. So it may be not respected. This is what worries us. Anyway, the point was, listen to this. Article 7 of the Code of Ethics. Right to tourism, the prospect of direct and personal access to the discovery and enjoyment of the planet's resources constitutes a right equally open to all the world's inhabitants. Bello, no? Diritto a godere e scoprire le risorse del pianeta è un diritto aperto in maniera indiscriminata a tutti gli abitanti del mondo. At the same time, the same entity, the same organism, say in another document, so it's still the United Nations. Loro dicono, lo trovo, le Nazioni Unite sono consapevoli, we are aware that tourism is the main driver. It was mentioned this morning by our economist colleague from Barcelona. I will never find it. Anyway, the tourism is conceived by the same United Nations as one of the main drivers for economic growth all over the world. Allora, questi sono I due features. It's a right, it's a subjective right. Anyone, everyone has the right to tourism, whatever this is. And the second remark, and we take for granted that it is something good for the economic growth. Allora, if we look at tourism in this perspective, what is happening to tourism law? C'è già la formula, la si usa, it's normally used, the tourism law, as if this is already an established branch of law with its own sources, with its own methods. But certainly it is a trend to take seriously in consideration for the future. Anyway, what happens to tourism law if we consider it as something that is necessary to govern an economic growth factor? Question mark. Answer. What is happening is exactly the same path that other economic activities have followed in economically developed areas of the world. As an Italian, as an European, let me spend a few words about what happened in Europe. In other economic activities, other fields, other sectors. In a few words, once the European legislators have realized that fisheries, rather than agriculture, rather than whatever industrial sector, rather than culture, is something good for the economic growth, what do they do in Brussels and Strasbourg? What do we do? We tend to create rules, to create law, cioè noi creiamo delle regole che servano al mercato. So what we are creating in Europe is a regulation of the market to avoid market abuses with a view to extending market structural features because the purpose is that we want a single market. If the market is a single one and it functions exactly the same way all over the market, the players inside the market may expand their activity. I'm not talking about tourism, as you see. But this is exactly the method that international law, the United Nations and other legislators in Europe are following. In other words, tourism is seen as an economic sector to govern with a view to strengthen the structural features of it. And going ahead, what is the step number one if you want to strengthen a market? Qual è la prima cosa da fare se vuoi rafforzare il mercato? Devi rafforzare quelli che devono vendere. This morning, if you read La Nuova Sardegna, the newspaper, the main newspaper here, there is an article written by Professor Mazzetti, and she outlines, she stresses this thing that if we look at tourism as a market, we tend to uniformize whatever service, whatever product, whatever behavior on the market. And this is exactly what is happening with the legislation on tourism. Can I very quickly tell you what the Italian law on tourism? C'è una legge italiana sul turismo onnicomprensiva, si chiama Codice del Turismo, è del 2011. Questa legge, this national law, Italian law, but it's very similar to the French, to the German, to the Austrian law, and just touching the cornerstones. Definition of touristic activity, definition of touristic professions, definition of who falls within the labor market, distinction of the types of accommodation. Quindi c'è la solita, we the lawyers, of course, we have to define and distinguish. We cannot create rules if not with words, and we have to decide what words we want to use as bricks for our rules. So, definizione di attività, definizione di professione, definizione di mercato del lavoro, definizione dei tipi di accoglienza. E allora ci sono gli hotels, motels, open air, villages, residencies, bed and breakfast. Why do we do that? Because for each of them we have different rules and different types of legal liability. And let me go ahead. Different, listen now, types of touristic products. So exactly what Antonietta says on the Nuova Sardegna this morning. Prodotti turistici, it's a little bit like ours product in the academic world. Noi dobbiamo produrre i prodotti, siamo tenuti a sfornare prodotti scientifici, e anche nel mondo del turismo ci sono i touristic products. What are touristic products under Italian law? Mountain tourism, sea tourism, lake and river tourism, different products with different rules and different liabilities. I am bound, I'm obliged to give different standard if I am selling mountain touristic product in respect of when I sell culture touristic product. This is the fourth. Unfortunately, culture is number four. Religious tourism, nature like trekking, food and beverage, wellness, sport and golf. I wonder why sport and golf, two different, as if they would consider golf as a real sport, or maybe it's because it's too important. This is important. This comes from China. This acronym is MICE. M-I-C-E. M-I-C-E. M stands for meeting. I stands for incentive. E stands for events. And C stands for congress. And E stands for events. MICE. MICE. Meetings, incentive, congress, events. Can you imagine? In Italy we have not too many large businesses, probably Generali, Ferrero, Leni, and that's it. But can you imagine in China how many huge businesses, firms, companies, corporations they have? And what is their internal policy? They offer to their employees i viaggi premium. Allora they take, it's basically mass deportation. No, sono delle deportazioni di massa, 1000 dipendenti della grande corporation che vengono mandate a Las Vegas, Paris, London, as a sort of incentive, because it's a reward given to their employees, and also they create events at destination. Anyway, this is another touristic product. And then youth tourism, made in Italy tourism, aimed at fostering the knowledge of typical Italian products, etc. The social-oriented tourism, we are talking about this one. So, it's last issue in the Italian law. The insurance, what insurance has to do with tourism? Look, it happened exactly the same thing for the market of the patient's circulation, la circolazione europea dei pazienti. Di nuovo, che c'entra col turismo la circolazione europea dei pazienti? There is a general freedom of movement in Europe that allows also to patients to be cured in hospitals and healthcare structure all over Europe, and as a consequence, we are all free to travel for that purpose. What happens if by traveling into a foreign hospital to be cured, I'm not cured? Well, the European legislator does not want this distortion. Se io vado a curarmi a Parigi, o se un finlandese viene a curarsi a Sassari e va qualcosa storto, e il legislatore europeo non vuole che vada qualcosa storto, perché se va qualcosa storto si inceppa il mercato, so it's going to be a distortion of the market. I will go back home and tell my relatives, never go to Paris to be cured, because so the European legislator, the market legislator, does not want distortions. You see, it's a typical economic terminology, language, and philosophy. So they don't want this. So what is the subrogated solution if something goes wrong? Insurance. So circulation, free movement, right to tourism, but also supported by a universal insurance cover. This is also compulsory. No one may offer touristic products unless it has been previously covered with an insurance product. So, avete capito l'antifona? If we protect the consumers will buy. If we protect the tourists will travel more and will buy more of these touristic products. I'm not here to bore you any longer with other legal technicalities. What we are seeing under Italian law, the same, it may be envisaged under other local national legislation. Very last concept. Because tourism as an important driver for economic growth is more recent than other economic areas and economic activity. At least, there is a small news that may be the signal that for once, legislators around the world, starting from the United Nations, have the chance to govern the economic side, quindi il turismo come fattore di crescita, ma anche contemporaneamente gli aspetti diversi da quello economico. If you look this code of ethics, the code of ethics tables, just as bullet points. United Nations, they tackle the need to contribute to mutual understanding. So if the tourist goes to a specific destination, the tourist must This is the idea that is inspiring the United Nations. The tourist should be ready to listen to local culture, local sensitiveness. The stakeholders in the tourism arena, the stakeholders, this is another trendy word, stakeholders are not only the tourists but also those who receive the flows. So you have many times the word respect in the host communities, and local professionals should acquaint themselves with and respect the tourists who visit them. Also, the tourists should respect the minorities, the indigenous people, traditions, and so on. Taking in consideration the need for safety, just listen to these keywords: safety, vulnerability of local communities, the need for prevention, security, preventing attacks, preventing threat against personal safety, avoiding the exploitation of human beings in respect of sexual tourism, enhancing self-education, mutual tolerance, and so on. Very, very quickly, my point is that maybe we have the chance to produce legislation. We are still in time. It's not like in the European Union when we commenced in 1958 only with a view to help businesses. No? Questo era la Comunità Europea alle origini, business, and that's it. Only after 30, 40 years we commenced the social chapter, free movement of students, culture, wealth, healthcare. But if you go to Brussels, you see that the building where the Consumer Directorate is located is completely surrounded by the lobbies buildings. No? Cioè, la sede dove c'è la Direzione Generale dei Consumatori a Bruxelles è un palazzino piccolino circondato dai palazzi di chi fa la lobby, cioè chi va dal commissario europeo ai consumatori e dirgli no, modifica questa legge, tutto regolamentato, no? Il lobbying è una cosa fatta seria e trasparente. Però for once in this sector of tourism we have maybe the chance to tackle either the social accessibility, social issues, sustainability from the environmental point of view, at the same time. Of course it depends on policy, it depends on whom we choose to represent us, dipende da chi abbiamo come politici, e direi basta. Thank you for your attention.
Hello? Can you hear me? No. Yes. Hello, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and hello to everybody, and our friends for the international network. And my name is Matteo Corleone, I'm professor at the University of Milano Bicocca, and I selected some slides because after the first speeches, I decided to select my presentation and focusing on demand system management to improve sustainable mobility. I hope it's a series of 15 or 20 slides in order to focus on the concept of demand management. Why we have to think about demand management? Because this is the reality. And despite the increasing attention on the unsustainable, harmful consequences of motorized mobility. And over the last decades, the number of mechanical vehicles has increased a lot. Really. And between 1960 and 2010, the number of cars worldwide increased more than sevenfold, and the number of trucks and buses increased more tenfold. And today we have more or less 611 million of mechanical vehicles all around the world. According to one of the most important sources in the world, the Schaffer, the scholar from Germany, and according to this scholar, the largest wave of motorization is yet to come. Perhaps, we get a peak in Western societies, perhaps in Western countries, but this is not true at all around the world. Because they are the developing countries in Africa, but notably in Asia and in the Middle East. And little by little, they are increasing the possession and the use of mechanical cars. I was in China, I was in Indonesia, and the last year I was completely astonished about the number of cars. Not in China, because in China we have a good number of electric cars, notably motorbicycles, moped, but in Indonesia, for example, the third and the bigger country all around the world, the number of motorization is dramatically increasing. And if you look at one of the most important European archive on model split, the EPOM, you can download some interesting data about motorization all around the world. You can, there's 82%, and Europe is a private transport, 82%. Okay, Amsterdam is a very good situation. It's the same in Milan, but all around the world is completely different. 82% is a private transport, with very, very, very small differences between the different countries. Because the figure, and considering the different countries, is an average data. We have to pay really attention when we compare data. Because if we compare Berlin, London, Paris, Milan, okay, you get the data. But when you compare regions, when you compare metropolitan areas, when you compare countries, the situation is completely different. And we have to manage mobility at different territorial level. So this is the problem. And when I talk with some colleagues for the university in Berlin and Munich, and we live in Milan, and I work in Milan, and we are very, very happy about our motor split. But when I go out of my city, the number of vehicles increased dramatically. For example, in Milan, we have a very good motor split. And with the use of public transport covers and the share of 25% for the cities of Milan. When I consider the citizens coming from the region or the outskirts area, okay, the figure is completely different because it's 70% of public is of private cars. So we have to manage the situation with different population and with different attitudes and behavior of mobility. If you look at this, if you scan this slide, you can observe the model split in Italy over the last 15 years. Many people in Italy, when we talk about the model split, they are very happy because walking is increasing and cycling is increasing. What did you say? Because the cycling in Italy covers a model split of 3.5%. 3.5%, and the walking is 15%. And over the last 15 years, private mobility and performed by cars has increased 9%. Has increased 9%. And the share of the public transport is stable. is stable more or less at 9%. So this is the reality, completely different than in other cities or in capital city. And this is the model and the share of electric vehicles. According to the source is the European Environment Agency, and 2018, okay, it's very good data because it's the last year. More or less, it's 1.7%, the share of electric vehicles, and compared to the overall immatriculation cars. So it's so low again. And so we have a different situation, of course. For example, we have the best situation, we know, for example, in Netherlands, sorry for the title of the country in Italian. But, okay, so in the Netherlands, we have a model share of the cycling is at 27%, and in Denmark, 18%, as we know. But in Italy, I told you, is at 3.2%. So low. And it's very astonishing considering who are the cyclists in Italy, Julia, and they knows very well. In Milan, for example, cyclists are high-class people. High-class people is incredible. The majority of people cycling come from the central Milan. They are not employees, they are professionals, and they live in the central Milan. They have the workplace in the central Milan, and they cycle. And in our university, and I will show you some interesting figures later, and considering different universities in Italy, according to a national sample inquiry. And in our university in Italy, and the professor use more cycle than students. Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, I think it's completely different in Toronto, in Amsterdam. But why? We don't know why. But well, we know why very well, because it's a problem of infrastructures. But there is also a problem of awareness, and I will focus on it in some steps. And this is the reality. This is a very interesting table, and provided by Littman. I don't know if you know Littman, one of the most important scholars, and studying workability and studying cycling. When you talk about mobility, we normally we think about mobility considering space, considering miles, not considering trips and time. If I ask you to Camillo, for example, how far is your work? Your home from your workplace, and Camillo replied to me, more or less 15 minutes. So okay, on foot. He doesn't answer 3 miles and 300 meters. It's normal, because when we consider space, we consider space from the point of view of the time. Compare the different and modes in this table. Work, bicycle, motorcycle, and so on. Okay, miles and the work and the covers 2.8%. But when we consider the travel time, okay, we cover the 18% of our time, our daily time. When we consider our trips, so the increase in 25%, this is normal, because every movement is made up of working. It's normal. So we have to change completely our statistics, our way to look at mobility, to look at the mobility of citizens. Because also when people, if I ask Camillo again, what is your most important mobility in your life? Camillo perhaps reply me and working, because it's very, very lucky, because he lives in Sassari. But in my case in Milan, I replied a bus or a train or cars. But when I think about my movement, it's not really so. When we carry out budget time, a time budget, okay, the techniques is very important to collect information about the time and performing different activities. So we can observe very, very thoroughly, these different segments of mobility. And a very high amount of mobility is performed by cycling and on foot. So we have to change our length of observation. Because differently, this is the very, very famous consequences of this model split focused on private vehicles, traffic, pollution, and accident. But when we want to manage mobility policies, so normally we manage 4 different types of measures. Okay, improving modal alternatives, this is normal, nothing very, very difficult to understand. Changing the built environment, implement pricing disincentives, but I wanted to focus on the last one, because this is more important for the social scientists, not also for sociologists, for anthropologists, for example, for psychologists. So changing individual attitudes of behavior. And I will show you some interesting results and acting in different ways on the university students, using different methods, or to adopt a measure of implementing pricing disincentives, or to adopt a different measure and acting on changing the individual attitudes and behavior. Why? Because I don't know if you know the ABC paradigm. It has been put forward 10 years ago by Schiller. Schiller is a scholar coming from England, and she works with journalists as well. And she used to work with the journalists. And she talked about the ABC paradigm, and the show as well. And what means ABC paradigm? A is attitudes, B is behavior, the social practices, and the third point is modal choices. If I want to change modal choices, I have to change behaviors and to change attitudes. This is good in general, not just for mobility. Also, when I want to change, for example, our habit, our consuming habit during a daily life, when I wanted to change my behavior in general. So this is very interesting, because this is a soft transport policy measure, not hard. Okay, our friend coming from Toronto, and the show is very interesting and measure, and acting on the hard policy, change cycle lanes, construct a good cycle lane. It's so important. A cycle lane connecting and the different hubs in our environment. But we are sociologists, so we are not designer and urbanist engineers. So in this case, we work on the soft transport policy. Moser, Bamberg, and quoted, and try to influence individual decisions, making less by using force and restrictions, but rather by persuasion, that is by changing people's perception and motivation. So the step is not very, very, very easy, because we talk about our behavior. And when we talk about our behavior, we have 2 conceptual spheres. And the theory of planned behavior and the theory of script-based choice behavior. That's completely different. And okay, look out, and moving and working is not a rational behavior. It's a script-based behavior. Like eating, like relaxing, like sleeping. And in general, it's very, very difficult to change our script-based behavior. It's very difficult because they are embedded in our habit, and it's so difficult to change our habit. I can say to my students, oh, don't take the cars and to get to university. Don't get the car. And they reply, why not? Why not? Oh, because it's polluting. Oh, okay, it's polluting. It's not interested. But it's polluting, and if you take and if we ride a cycle, it's amusing. or Julia said, no amusing, it's a freedom. It's freedom. Okay, so you have to work on the concept of freedom and to change little by little their behaviors, increasing the level of freedom in their life. So model choices are script-based choices, unlikely to be influenced by rational arguments. If you smoke, and I say you don't smoke because it's very, very bad for your health, and you replied, oh yes, I understood, but it's not my problem. It's not my problem. Okay. So if you reply, and if you are very old, okay, give up. Give up. Okay, it's your choice. If you are young, I don't give up. I try to change your behavior. Don't say you what to do, but offering to you some opportunities. So in this case, we talk about, for example, advertising awareness campaigns, normal, and personalized motoring information. And this one is very interesting, personalized or customized motoring information. So we have to work on the habit, changing the habit little by little. We had to work in long time, not in short time. It's impossible to change behaviors in short time. It's impossible. I need time. Time, like space, are structural dimension of our behavior. Our behavior are not settled in space and time. Our behaviors are made by time and space. Don't forget, it's specific for sociologists. Our behavior is made by space and time, really, always. So I need time and space to change my behavior. It's not necessary, not sufficient to say you in a rational way, change your behavior. I have to say, change your time, change your space if you want to change your behavior. And then we have to work on people who are willing to change, not for all. The funds are not unlimited. Are not unlimited, unfortunately. There are some people in Milan, they want to park their cars in front of the cathedral. Oh, don't worry, because I'm very rich. If you take my own, I pay the fine. No problem. So I don't work on this type of people. I'm not interested. If you are a very, very hard smoker, I'm not interested to work with you. I want to work with people who are willing to change. And for example, at the university, I have a fund of, for example, 300,000 euros to invest. In order to improve sustainable mobility, I work on the first year student, not second year, not third year. First year student, why? Because they haven't yet socialized to mobility. Somebody, I don't remember who told me, in Amsterdam, Philips decided not to go to the private cars to manager, but a season ticket. The new manager, great choice. When you go to the mountain, for example, in Südtirol, Italy, and you are a tourist, and when you enter into your room, you find on your table, on your bed table, a season ticket, free, completely free, with a sentence, leave your cars parked. Great. Because you have two incentives. The first one is don't pay. The second one is not to be socialized, to use the cars during your holiday. When you are a tourist, you are like a migrant because you are not socialized. And many municipalities in the United States did the same with the newcomers. For example, the new residents. People who moved their residence in a new town, okay, I give you a completely free and a season ticket. Then, after a year, they checked. Okay, I check again your season ticket. And they have to compute how many of them changed their behavior. It's a great result. in our university we are trying to give a completely free or quite free season ticket to students. And we started to give a season ticket with a very, very low price to professors and employees. And we found out they adopted and used the season ticket all in general, also for your day and leisure, not just to commute. And this is a good result. And this is the situation of the model split in our university. Okay, we carried out a survey. We carried out a survey about some years ago, and we can see the model split. There are 40 universities and 70,000 students. A lot of students, professors, and employees, of course. And like as I mentioned before, and the share of and active mobility is 16%, 13 work and 3.6 bicycle. Okay, we have a good data concerning local public transport and train. Of course, we are talking about the students and university people, and who are normally they use public transport and public transport is again not active mobility. So in this case, we wanted to improve the mobility in order to enhance sustainable mobility. We have 3 types of measures. The first one is the concession measure, the restriction measure, the persuasion measure. We have to well combine these 3 different types of measures, because normally our policies are concession policies, always. To concede to everyone, to construct a cycle lane, to go to a season ticket free. Okay, good. But the funds are again not unlimited. So we have to to act at the same time with restriction policies, disincentives to the use of private vehicles, pricing policies are very, very important. Reduction of parking space. I talked with my chancellor, with my rector, and proposing to her, it's a woman, it's a medicine, and to delay the parking. No, it's not possible to delay the parking, because so we have again the parking for professors to park the cars. I know some interesting cases in Netherlands, in Delft, in England as well, and university lighting the possibility, the parking slot. This is typical restriction policy, but it's also very interesting persuasion policies, raising the awareness of the problem and changing the lifestyle of our students. So in this case, okay, you can adopt, for example, concession strategies. The policies are very well known, for example, and agreement with the local public transport companies, discounted travel card, and agreement with the companies providing shared mobility, very, very normal. Some pictures, Share and Go in Milan. We have different companies for sharing mobility, and we have, myself with my students and the cycling in front of our university, and we have a different agreement with sharing a bicycle company. That's good, and some of our students in front of our university using ATM, which is the sharing system and the bicycle in Milan. Good result, yes, but it's not enough. We had to prohibit the private cars from accessing or parking in the public space of the university, and this is so difficult to prohibit something, because mobility is a part of our behaviors. It's very difficult to say you don't park your car there. It's very difficult. Or replace the car fleet with a hybrid or full electric cars. So in this case, we prefer the two, and I finish, and the two, and to work on strategies aimed at changing values and norms and attitudes of individuals. Of course, and sustainable mobility campaigns, they next week is the European and the Sustainable Mobility Week, you know. But it's better to work on awareness raising campaigns, and notably with personalized travel planning or PTP. And I show you the last slide, and if you skim this slide, okay, in the three parts, this is a new measure, and we adopted in our university, and with a sample of the students. We provided a sample of students with a program, and with a program on their and a smartphone, in order to collect information, and with the GPS system to pick up information about their mobility. In this case, they little by little, and we tracked their mobility. At the end, they show you the result. They look at your mobility, and now we compare another type of mobility using public transport or using active mobility, and these are the different goals you can achieve. In this case, quite interesting share of people change their behavior of mobility. So it's not enough to say you don't use your car. You have to little by little follow people to change their behavior. Thank you.
Ringrazio i quattro relatori, è stato tutto molto interessante. Ancora 4 parole in italiano, ma io direi 3 parole in latino. Ite, missa, est. Grazie. Sì, no, c'è un annuncio. Infatti io
So, it will be in Italian because it's about the screening of the movie. So, domenica il 15 alle ore 20 proietteremo al Politecnico Argonautico a Centro Bologna il documentario Why We Cycle, è un documentario sulla bicicletta in Olanda, la prima volta che viene proiettato in Italia, ed è molto importante per capire la sociologia della bicicletta. Quindi se volete è gratuito, siete invitati.
Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah. Behavior change hard. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, please. I'm out of time.
Don't worry. Because I am also mobility manager.
Ah,
Because we understand well,